If Henry's health check shows any issues, I'll support him to get back to normal levels. If his salt intake is too high, I'll come up with low-sodium recipes. If he's drinking too much and staying up late, I'll encourage him to go to bed early. It's all because I, as his wife, have a sincere wish for Henry to live a long life. And yet, my husband Henry laughed at me, holding up his smartphone camera while I was suffering and exhausted. Could you forgive such a horrible spouse? I'm Emma. I'm 62, and my grandchildren are my pride and joy. After watching the morning news until 8:30, I clean the house and do the laundry before starting my work in the office. This has been my routine for nearly 40 years. Henry, who is 3 years older than me, runs his own business, and I handle the office and accounting work. Henry's motto is to work for life, and ever since we got married, he's been working tirelessly without weekends. Work, work, and more work. Work seems to be his lifeblood. When our kids were little, I often wished he would spend more time with them instead of me taking care of them alone, like what we now call solo parenting. We hardly ever went on family trips, and the only trip I can remember is a 3-night stay in Anchorage for a relative's wedding. Now, our daughter and son are over 30, have their own families, and are doing well. Our grandchildren are adorable. But I still want to go on a long trip with Henry at least once more in my life. I've mentioned it to him on his 50th birthday and our 30th wedding anniversary, but Henry just brushes it off, saying, maybe someday, without seriously considering it. Our daughter Mia often invites me, saying, let's go on a trip with my family. But I feel guilty about leaving Henry behind working and going on an overnight trip. So, I end up enjoying day trips with my friends from the neighborhood and spending the rest of my days cooking for Henry while using a calculator for our finances. One day, Henry was diagnosed with high blood pressure during a health checkup. Henry loves sweets and salty foods, and he's been borderline diabetic since his 50s. Now, he also has high blood pressure. The doctor warned us that the combination of diabetes and high blood pressure could worsen kidney and retinal problems, and that we should review our lifestyle. I was terrified. But Henry didn't care and kept eating anchovies while downing beer. Hey Henry, the doctor said we should start watching our salt and sugar intake. Doctors always exaggerate. I've lived this way for 65 years, and changing now won't make much of a difference. But Mr. Davis next door, who's about your age, was hospitalized for heart disease last month. We need to be careful. He smokes too. I only eat and drink, so I'll be fine. But Henry, your waistline has grown significantly recently. What? Yes, Henry's triglycerides are also high. Diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, the so-called lifestyle diseases. In Henry's case, it's due to drinking, eating habits, and lack of exercise. He used to be slim and handsome, but since his 40s, he's gained a lot of weight around his waist, and in the past 6 months, it seems to have grown even more. Henry is aware of it and hates it when I point it out. Shut up! I'd rather die happy eating what I like than live long depriving myself. That may be true, but I want you to live a long life. Oh, shut up! Shut up! You're ruining my drink! Henry's loud voice drowned out my lecture, and he waved his hand as if shooing away a fly. Then he turned up the TV volume and ignored me while he bit into some cheese. Whenever I worry about his health, this is what happens. I just want to live a long life with Henry, but I can't tell if he's overconfident about his health or just pretending not to care. Still, I couldn't help but worry about Henry's diagnosis and the doctor's words, so I decided to prepare meals with less salt and sugar. No taste. The next day at lunch, Henry frowned as he sipped the vegetable soup I had reduced the salt in. I used less salt than usual. What? Instead, I made the broth carefully from vegetables and chicken bones. Doesn't it smell good? Henry silently added salt to the vegetable soup. Henry, what are you doing? Vegetable soup without salt is just muddy water. Give me white bread too. But rye bread makes you chew more, so you feel fuller. I don't want to fill my stomach with hard bread. If you can't make it, I'll get pizza. Henry! Henry didn't touch anything else besides the vegetable soup and quickly stood up and left the house. Even after that, I tried to reduce Henry's salt and sugar intake, but he stubbornly refused, and our mealtimes were tense. This bad atmosphere affected our daily lives, and even Mia, who visited with her grandchildren, sighed. Dad, you should appreciate Mom more. Some wives wish their husbands would die sooner. You're lucky. Shut up. Even his own daughter's advice didn't reach Henry. Really? Mom, you should just ignore him. He won't change until his diabetes gets worse, and he goes blind or something. But anyway, Mom, aren't you going to eat these cookies? They're from your favorite store. Oh, thank you. But I haven't had much of an appetite lately. What? Are you okay? My daughter's eyes widened. Actually, for a while now, I haven't been hungry, and even watching gourmet shows doesn't make me want to eat. Is it the stress from worrying about Henry's diet? If I said that, my daughter's eyes would narrow, so I gave a vague answer. Maybe it's because this summer is so hot. Amelia, do you want to eat Grandma's share too? Yes. My granddaughter Amelia's eyes lit up as she climbed onto my lap and started eating the cookie. And now, that will be too much for her. Mom, don't reduce your food intake just because you don't have an appetite. What if you get sick before Dad? You're right. Thank God. I was grateful for my daughter's genuine concern as I patted my sweaty, damp granddaughter's head. At that time, I really thought the loss of appetite was due to stress or the summer heat affecting my health. I never imagined that such a serious illness was lurking. The days of having no appetite continued, and even cooking became a chore. Still, hoping for Henry's health, I held the knife desperately while suppressing my nausea. Sometimes Henry ate reluctantly, but other times he got angry, saying he couldn't eat this, and went out to eat. I felt tears welling up at the unreasonable treatment of the food I had made with my tired body, but even so, I kept looking for recipes with reduced salt and sugar for Henry and continued to cook for him. Then one day, "Hey, aren't you getting rounder lately? Huh?" As I sat idly watching TV in the living room, I could feel Henry staring intensely at my body. Feeling annoyed by his rude gaze, I also noticed that something was off with my body. Actually, my pants haven't been fitting lately. I sighed while rubbing my swollen belly. For the past month or so, even though I had no appetite, my body hadn't lost weight. Instead, my legs and stomach had swelled. Seeing this, Henry's eyes gleamed. Hey, you keep nagging me, but you're the one who's been unhealthy. That's not true. You're probably sneaking good food while feeding me tasteless meals, right? Henry had a puzzled look on his face, but seemed pleased as he complained. Maybe he felt proud of his observation. I'm not eating anything special. You know I can barely eat regular meals. That's exactly why you're hiding good food. Pretending to be a good wife while being a strict one just towards me. It's not true. I wanted to fight back, but my body was too weary and my mind too sluggish. I feel like something's wrong with my body. I might be sick. It's probably the same lifestyle disease as mine. After preaching to me, you end up with it yourself. How ironic. Yeah. Could this be a lifestyle disease? I didn't know. But I knew for sure that my body was signaling for help. It was Friday night. I planned to visit my regular doctor after the weekend. But by the next evening, my fatigue and shortness of breath worsened, and I couldn't get out of bed. Something was wrong. Something was definitely wrong. Gaining weight shouldn't make it this hard to breathe. I wanted to go to the hospital, but I didn't feel capable of driving myself. After 6 p.m., when Henry returned from work, I struggled to approach him, leaning against the wall. Henry, I'm sorry, but could you take me to the emergency room? My stomach, it's hard to breathe. Seeing me clutching my belly, Henry was stunned. Then he burst into laughter. Take you to the emergency room because your belly's big? That's ridiculous. Please. No way. It's embarrassing. Do you want the ER to tell you you're just overweight? The ER is for emergencies only. Be reasonable. I knew that. But this discomfort couldn't just be from gaining weight. Even if my eyes pleaded, Henry showed no sign of taking me to the hospital. So, I resorted to calling 911. If it turned out to be just weight gain, I'd be really sorry. When I told Henry I'd called an ambulance, he scoffed and took photos with his smartphone. Maybe he wanted to laugh later about his wife calling an ambulance for being overweight. I felt utterly disillusioned with Henry, whom I'd cherished and served for years. But if it meant relieving this suffering, I didn't care about Henry. When the paramedics arrived, Henry scratched his head with a half-smile, saying his wife was being dramatic. However, the paramedics ignored Henry, measured my oxygen levels, and gently spoke to me. Your levels are quite low. It must have been tough. You'll feel better with some oxygen. Oh. Huh? Tears welled up at the paramedics' kind words. Henry stood there, dumbfounded. The paramedics quickly gave him instructions, and I was taken to the ambulance, feeling both relieved and losing consciousness. Later, at the hospital, emergency treatment alleviated my breathing difficulty. Both Henry and I thought I had just gained weight, but we were wrong. The swelling in my hands and face was edema, and my abdomen was filled with fluid. I was shocked, but at the same time, I felt a sense of inevitability. Henry has been dumbfounded since the ambulance arrived. Naturally, I was admitted to the hospital immediately and underwent a thorough examination. Henry seemed completely unreliable, so I felt bad for Mia, who had her own family, but I decided to leave the hospital preparations and household matters to her. Then, on Monday, after all the tests were completed, my disease was given a name. Since it caused ascites to accumulate, it wasn't a mild condition. Depending on the progression of the disease, it might even come with a prognosis. Henry, who was listening to the doctor's diagnosis next to me, kept his head down, his expression unreadable. Was he regretting laughing at me for being fat when I was actually sick? Or was he finally realizing that he could end up in a dangerous condition like mine due to his own diabetes and high blood pressure? Maybe he was disappointed that I had become useless now that I was ill. If that's the case, I should divorce him. I don't want to spend the last part of my life being insulted. I pondered such things absent-mindedly as I listened to the doctor's words. Then suddenly, Henry stood up and slammed something he had taken out of his pocket onto the desk. The doctor and I were, of course, stunned. When I looked at what he had slammed down, I saw it was Henry's driver's license. I was even more confused. Henry shouted at us, who were still in shock. I'm giving my liver to my wife. So save her. What? Look, I checked the donor box. This way, I can give my organs to my wife, right? Henry grabbed his driver's license and held it up close to the doctor's face. I was bewildered by Henry's unexpected statement, but I quickly grabbed his arm. Henry, wait! That's rude to the doctor. Please! You're a doctor who's smarter than I am, right? Do something! With my health deteriorating and feeling weak, I couldn't restrain the much larger Henry. 2 nurses stepped in between us, and the doctor backed away in his chair. Though the doctor showed a moment of agitation, he quickly regained his composure and spoke calmly to Henry. Please calm down. How can I be calm? Noticing the trembling in the arm I had grasped, I was at a loss for words. When I looked up at Henry's face, his distorted mouth was quivering. In nearly 40 years together, I had never seen this expression on him. Not when our children were born, not when our daughter got married, never. I understand how much you care about Emma, but a liver transplant also places a significant burden on the donor. I don't care. Additionally, we can only perform a transplant with a healthy liver. Henry, do you have confidence in your health? Are you free from liver disease, high blood pressure, or diabetes? Well, Henry's face turned pale, and he looked restless. Seeing this, the doctor let out a small sigh. I will do my best to treat Emma. Please, Henry, support her emotionally and physically. Henry collapsed into a chair, looking utterly defeated. I was completely bewildered by this sight. I couldn't reconcile this image with the man who had been pleased by my weight gain and never showed a shred of concern. Afterward, Henry followed me to my hospital room, looking more unsteady than the sick person, and slumped into a chair with a look of utter despair. I couldn't help but murmur, "Have you finally understood how worried I was about your health?" At my sarcastic question, Henry looked up in surprise. I didn't want you to realize it this way, you know. Forcing a smile, I looked at Henry as he opened his mouth to say something. But no words came out, and he just stood there, holding his head in his hands. After a moment, Henry muttered that he would come back tomorrow and left the hospital room with his shoulders slumped. Watching his retreating figure, always so proud and upright, filled me with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite define. Was he shocked? Maybe the thought of his wife being in a life-threatening situation, severe enough to consider giving up his own organ. Or was it just guilt? Perhaps the fear that he might face the same fate one day. I didn't know, but I felt like I had avenged myself on Henry for all his past actions by putting my life on the line. After that, I went through various tests, discussed the causes and future of my illness with the doctors, and continued my treatment. Henry participated in these discussions too, but he was stunned to hear that there was no fundamental cure for my condition, that it could only be managed with palliative care, and that it could become malignant if it progressed. Even your diabetes and high blood pressure are similar, Henry, I said, and he furrowed his brows and twisted his mouth. I was determined to live, so I listened carefully to the doctors and proactively sought advice from the dietitian. Henry attended the nutrition counseling sessions too, but he seemed completely lost. What was that? It was all technical terms and too complicated. They should explain things in simpler terms that lay people can understand. The dietitian explained things very clearly. It's just that you have so little interest or experience in cooking. You always said the kitchen was a woman's domain and never helped at all. And while I appreciate you bringing me my clothes every time, they're always wrinkled and it's a hassle. Are you managing the laundry okay? My sarcastic comment made Henry, dressed in wrinkled clothes, choke on his words. Please try not to let the house fall apart until I get back. You should learn some household chores. I might leave before you do, you know. Don't even joke about that. Oh, you hate housework that much? Right, it's a woman's job after all. Henry glared at me with reddened eyes. But he said nothing more, placed the poorly folded laundry down, and left quietly. Until I was discharged, Henry didn't visit me at the hospital again. Maybe he was fed up with a wife who, once compliant and healthy, now constantly nagged him from her sickbed. When Mia came to exchange my clothes, I asked about Henry. Don't worry about Dad, Mom. It's his own fault, she replied curtly. My son Daniel, who visited on the weekend, also said, If it's too hard to live with Dad, Mom, you can come stay with us. My wife even agrees. I felt guilty towards Daniel's wife and couldn't accept the offer, but his words made me very happy. And then, as my symptoms stabilized and I was cleared for discharge, an expressionless Henry came to pick me up, and we went home. I wondered how much the house had deteriorated in Henry's hands, considering he couldn't do any housework. Garbage day was the day after tomorrow, so I needed to clean everything up by then. I'd also need to go grocery shopping later. Thinking about these things, I stood in front of our house for the first time in 10 days. And then, the living room, kitchen, and even the bathroom were surprisingly tidy. Of course, it's not perfect in every little detail, but there's no feeling that cleaning is needed right now. The refrigerator also had fresh vegetables and fish, making it seem like dinner could be made right away. Did Mia do this? I closed the refrigerator and called out to Henry.
I did it. What?
Henry? That controlling, work first Henry? As I stood there in amazement, Henry, looking irritated, pulled me out of the kitchen. He forcibly sat me down on the couch and told me to rest, then took my luggage to the bedroom. After putting away my luggage, he went upstairs, and 30 minutes later came down with folded laundry, making trips back and forth between the bedroom and the laundry room. In my 40 years of life, it was the first time I had seen Henry moving around so much in the house, so I couldn't take my eyes off him, feeling like I was watching some unknown creature. After finishing the laundry, he then stood in the kitchen and started boiling pasta. I stood up instinctively and peeked into the sink from beside him.
What? You know how to boil pasta? Are you okay?
Don't underestimate me. I can do this much. Henry pushed me aside, annoyed, and stirred the pasta. Oh no, if you stir it that hard, the water will overflow. I wanted to say something, but seeing Henry's serious face, I swallowed my words. It was like the day I first taught our daughter how to boil pasta. Without noticing my internal struggle, Henry set the timer for the pasta's boiling time and then opened the refrigerator without leaving the kitchen. He cut the vegetables with textbook precision, measured water with a measuring cup, and made vegetable soup. He then cut onions and tomatoes again with textbook precision, but struggled with cutting bacon. Watching this scene intently, I was told to go watch TV on the couch because I was being a nuisance. What he made was a light-colored vegetable soup, pasta, and salad.
This isn't how it was supposed to turn out.
Henry's face was clearly distorted with shock. I was more surprised that Henry had cooked than by the result, and I curiously started eating the pasta. The overcooked pasta was too soft with no firmness. The taste was even milder than what I usually make. The vegetables in the soup were too hard to chew, making sounds with every bite. The taste was, of course, bland. It wasn't something I could honestly say was delicious. If it were for the kids, I would simply say it was delicious, but saying that to Henry might hurt his pride. Wondering what to do, I chewed on the raw carrot. Then, Henry suddenly apologized.
I'm sorry.
What? Oh. The carrots are hard, but they can be eaten raw, so don't worry. The pasta is a bit overcooked, but it's fine. Not that.
What?
I'm really sorry for not taking you seriously until now, Emma. Oh. So that's what it was about. Distracted by seeing Henry doing housework, I had completely forgotten about my anger and resentment. While I wasn't bothered, Henry's face was deeply troubled. I always thought that a man's job was to earn money, and as a good earner, I was a good husband. I thought it was natural for women to support that and follow along quietly. Yeah. I couldn't stand being criticized for my health and food choices. As the one who takes the lead in this household, I believed I had the right to decide how I live or die. If it meant living a boring life by restricting my favorite foods, I'd rather eat what I love and die quickly. Yeah, but that was just an excuse. I never seriously imagined suffering from a real illness. I was convinced I would always stay healthy and keep working. So, everything you said or did felt like she was just being annoying. I see. I understand. We've been together for 40 years, after all. When you collapsed and your life was in danger, I finally realized. You truly cared about my health. You just wanted me to live a long and healthy life. It wasn't until I was in the same position, praying for you to survive, that I understood. I was frustrated. They said my liver was useless. They said you might die, and I couldn't do anything. Henry's voice, his fingers, they were trembling slightly, as if he were terrified. I wanted to do something for you when you got out of the hospital, so I learned how to do housework for Mia, but this is the result. I realized the importance of everything you did for me. Henry rubbed his now wide forehead against the dining table.
I'm truly sorry for everything. I'll do anything. If it means extending your life, I'll do anything. Please forgive me.
It was a heartfelt apology. Henry was sincere, bearing his heart without any dishonesty. The bandaged fingers were proof of his efforts with unfamiliar cooking. The clean room and folded laundry were signs of his change. Henry was stubborn and narrow-minded, unable to see beyond what was right in front of him. After all this, forgiving him seemed like the right thing to do. But I shook my head. I won't forgive you.
Emma.
Henry's face lifted, his voice filled with despair as I spoke firmly.
I'll never forgive you for what you did to me. I'll never forgive the face you made when you laughed at me for calling the ambulance.
Just thinking about it, the pain and sadness of that time came rushing back, bringing tears to my eyes. Holding them back, I coldly recounted Henry's worst actions. Henry didn't argue. He seemed prepared to accept any condemnation. After expressing all my grievances, I took a breath. Henry looked as if he were ready to face a death sentence. Looking at his face, I delivered my verdict.
I won't forgive you, but I accept your offer to help extend my life. What?
Henry's eyes widened even more at my command.
In order for me to live longer, eat balanced meals with me, walk every morning, avoid heavy drinking, and go to bed early. If you try hard, I'll fight against my illness.
This was what I had always wished for from Henry. It was the dream I had longed for us to grow old together. Some might say I'm being too lenient. But this is my choice to live the rest of my life without regret. Emma. Henry's eyes filled with tears. But that doesn't mean I'm forgiving him. Our marriage is still on shaky ground. But I'm not the kind of person who can abandon someone who recognizes their mistakes and tries to change. So not for his sake, but as a way for me to live comfortably, I decided to give Henry one more chance. Since then, my life with Henry has completely changed. Henry handed over most of his CEO responsibilities to Daniel, the heir, and only handled technical matters that only he could do. I also transferred most of my work to Daniel's wife. We started waking up early every morning and taking a walk in the nearby park. I prepared breakfast and lunch, and Henry took on the task of preparing dinner. Originally a perfectionist and craftsman at heart, Henry wasn't satisfied just reading my low-sodium recipes. He bought a bunch of nutrition books and quickly became more of a health enthusiast than I was. He didn't even know what green leafy vegetables were, but now he insists on eating leafy, root, and fruit vegetables every day. He works hard to create dishes rich in vegetable flavors, even with low salt. Daniel and Mia, who visit us, are astonished by Henry's transformation. He even won over our previously indifferent grandchildren by making homemade potato chips, becoming a doting grandpa before we knew it.
He's changed so much, it's kind of creepy.
Mia, once wary of her stubborn father, was now taken aback. But seeing how much he cherished me, she seemed reassured. A year after my hospital discharge, Henry and I took our first trip alone together. I was so excited, taking pictures of everything from the hotel's exterior to the random decorations in our room, and Henry muttered in exasperation.
Act your age. I can't help it. Traveling with you has been a lifelong dream.
I complained, and Henry's eyes widened. He quickly turned his head and walked to the edge of the hotel.
Henry?
Puzzled, I approached him and noticed his shoulders shaking.
Why are you crying on such a wonderful trip?
Because you.
Let's not dwell on it. Let's enjoy ourselves, okay?
Giving up on the immobile Henry, I gazed out the large window. The sea was calm. It was like a painting. There was still time before dinner, so I thought about going for a little walk. If I found any pretty shells, they would make a perfect souvenir for Amelia.
Emma.
What? He was suddenly standing next to me.
Thank you for being alive.
Even though he wouldn't look me in the eye, Henry's heartfelt words made me laugh. Likewise. I prayed that I would always feel that the choice I made back then was the right one, even in my final moments. As if wishing for a new lifetime of happiness, I held Henry's bony hand for the first time in decades. I'm Emma and I am 29 years old this year. My husband Jake is the same age, and we've been married for 3 years. We have occasional quarrels, but we've always respected each other and got along. Both my husband and I work full-time. We were quite content with our jobs, but as our 3rd wedding anniversary was approaching, we started to consider having children.
I've decided to get married.
Then, out of the blue, my brother suddenly announced. Not only I, but also my parents were taken aback by the sudden news. My brother, David, is 35. He works at a reputable company and is a sincere and kind older brother I'm proud of. However, he had never mentioned having a girlfriend before. Everyone was astonished when my brother, who has always been somewhat detached from the opposite sex, suddenly announced his own intention to marry. As we dug deeper into the story, we learned that his girlfriend of 6 months was pregnant, and they had decided to marry quickly.
What's she like?
She's lively and forthright. Well, since David is more of a laid-back type, maybe someone like her would be a better match. Our mother said with a chuckle, and our father nodded with a wry smile. Despite the surprise of a shotgun wedding, it was delightful news. They had already met her parents, and they asked us to meet her family soon. Can I come too?
Of course. I'd appreciate it if you and Jake could come.
David often visited my husband and me because they got along well. In fact, I think he enjoyed spending time with my husband more than me.
I think Jake will be happy too. Congratulations on your wedding, brother. Thanks.
David responded, blushing slightly as he smiled. His happiness seemed infectious, and I felt joy too. Then came the day of the meeting with the bride's family. We, my parents and us, a couple, were waiting in the hotel lobby.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
David arrived a little after the agreed-upon time, looking a bit flustered. A few minutes later, David's girlfriend and her parents arrived. Her name was Misty, who I had heard was 33, 2 years younger than my brother. In person, she looked even younger. Maybe it was because she was more beautiful and a bit flashier than I had imagined. My name is Misty. Nice to meet you, she said in a slightly nasal voice. Hearing her voice, my husband exclaimed, "Huh? What's the matter?"
No, it's nothing,
he replied after some thought, shaking his head. Despite his odd behavior, the meeting went smoothly. My husband's unusual demeanor was worrisome, but I turned to Misty when addressed. Emma, right? Let's get along, shall we?
Yes, I hope we can be good friends too.
With her warm smile, I found myself smiling back. Although I sensed something was off about my husband, I momentarily pushed that aside, relieved to see that my brother's wife-to-be seemed to be a pleasant person. However, I was soon to realize that my instinct about my husband was right. After their marriage registration, my brother announced they were planning to have a wedding ceremony. It was the fervent wish of his wife, he said. I understood their sentiment. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event. She was already pregnant, and my brother wanted to fulfill her wish, so they decided to hurry and hold the ceremony before her belly got too big. I was surprised when I heard they managed to secure a date for the ceremony a few months from now due to a cancellation. The couple decided to live in my brother's house, about an hour's drive from ours. One day, during a weekday off, the doorbell unexpectedly rang while I was home. Hello there.
Misty?
It was my brother's wife standing at the door. Aside from dropping off some items, she had never visited our house before.
I came to visit. You're off today, aren't you?
Leaving me bewildered, she boldly stepped into the house. I hurriedly followed her in, finding her curiously looking around the house.
Is my brother?
Of course he's at work.
It's a weekday.
That wasn't the point of my question. But she started talking before I could clarify.
I'm just bored at home. You must be bored too, being home alone.
Hey, I'm thirsty. Can you make me some tea? Feeling awkward, I went to prepare some tea, but when I came back, she had closed the windows and turned on the air conditioning.
Tea is not good during pregnancy, right? I'm sorry, I don't have any caffeine-free options at home, only mineral water. Oh, well. It can't be helped.
Sorry. For some reason, I found myself apologizing as I handed her the mineral water. She sipped it, glancing around the room with a small smile on her face.
What a small house! Excuse me? Hey, I heard you guys didn't have a wedding, right?
I was taken aback by the abrupt change in topic. We got married almost 3 years ago, and yes, we never had a ceremony. When we were discussing a wedding after getting married, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Luckily, we hadn't made any reservations yet. We had a long discussion, including whether we should have a ceremony at all, and in the end, we decided not to. Neither of us was particular about having a wedding, and we agreed to save the money for our future home instead. We explained this to both sets of parents and appeased them by agreeing to have wedding photos taken.
Well, we weren't in a position to have one when we got married. But you still haven't had one, right? We decided together.
Well, I guess you have to say that, don't you? She let out a dramatic sigh, resting her cheek in her hand. There was a slight smirk on her face. Poor thing. Not even having a wedding ceremony. She exaggeratedly declared that, not giving me a chance to retort. It's not that we couldn't have a wedding ceremony, but she didn't give me a chance to interject. So small a home, and no wedding ceremony. Have you had kids yet?
Well, truly pitiful. But what else could we expect, looking at you?
I thought I'd misheard. But after seeing Mysael's mocking grin, I realized she'd indeed uttered those words. Indeed, compared to Mysael, I wasn't especially beautiful. I wasn't gorgeous or cute, nothing to write home about. This was the first time anyone had belittled me to my face like this. After that, she often visited on my days off and kept belittling me. Looking at the glass in the kitchen, she'd comment,
Truly a mess. But I suppose it can't be helped if you're busy at work, can it?
And on days when I wasn't wearing makeup because I was off.
Maybe you should wear makeup even on your days off?
Well, even with makeup, there's only so much you can do.
Maybe that's why your husband doesn't see you as a woman?
Every time she saw my actions, my home, my appearance, she'd laugh triumphantly and make snide comments. It wasn't outright ridicule, but she belittled me with the pretense of sympathy. She was my brother's wife, and their wedding was just around the corner. I felt like I shouldn't escalate things, so I didn't say anything to my brother or my husband. However, the stress of being ridiculed repeatedly was overwhelming, and my husband began to worry about me more and more. You seem to have lost your appetite, and your complexion doesn't look good. Maybe you should see a doctor. My husband kept saying this, and although I pushed back at first, I finally gave in. I thought it was stress, but recently I've been feeling dizzy and my body won't accept food. I went to the hospital just in case and I was in for a surprise.
What's going on, suddenly calling everyone together like this?
My mother seemed uneasy because I had called my parents and my brother's family to our home. Looking at my mother's nervousness, my husband and I shared a small laugh.
Actually, I'm pregnant.
The first thing I thought when the doctor mentioned the possibility of pregnancy was, no way. I thought it was time to consider having children, but recently it was the last thing on my mind. What I thought was stress was actually morning sickness.
Pregnant? Yes, I'm still in the early stages. Emma.
Suddenly, My brother raised his voice and gave me and my husband next to me a strong hug. When I turned around in surprise, I saw that his eyes were filled with tears.
Congratulations! I'm so happy, as if it were happening to me.
Big brother. Seeing my brother's reaction made me tear up as well. My parents joined in crying, and afterwards we all shared a laugh. As we were all talking happily as a family, I suddenly felt a gaze on me. When I turned towards the gaze and gasped. My Asael was glaring at me with a scary expression.
You know, Misty.
After returning home, my husband started speaking with a hesitant look.
I feel like she was glaring at you with a scary look.
So my husband also saw her face. Afterwards, when my brother spoke to my Sael, she answered with a quickly constructed smile, so I thought I was the only one who saw it. Looking at my worried husband, I thought it might be better to keep quiet.
Actually,
ever since my brother got married, his wife often came over unannounced. And each time, she continued to make snide remarks. As I choked on my words, recalling the emotions of those moments, my husband quietly listened. So, I want to keep a distance for a while.
I think I should keep my distance too.
Yeah, but she might come over to our house all of a sudden. What should we do?
What about going back to your parents' house for a while?
My parents' house?
Yeah, you've been struggling with morning sickness. Can you commute to work from there?
If you do that, I'll feel relieved knowing you're at your parents' house. My husband reassures me, and I breathe a sigh of relief. We have no intention of telling my parents about this right now. I don't want to rain on the parade of my newlywed brother, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion. But, right now, I can use my morning sickness as an excuse to return home. Still, why is she attacking you so much?
I have no idea. The first time I met her was at the pre-wedding meeting.
The next time I met her, she was like that, and I really don't understand why.
I feel like I've seen her before. Eh? Where?
My husband had reacted strangely when we first met her. I can't be certain. Although he evades, he says he'd like to look into it if he can. A few days later, we were to learn a shocking truth. Back at my parents' house, my husband frequently visited, and there were no more attacks from my Ciel. It was peaceful. Just as my morning sickness was calming down, and the wedding day arrived without a hitch. We were getting ready at home, later than my parents who had left early. When we were about to leave, my Asael called. You've already prepared?
Yes. We're about to head out.
Sorry. We don't have a seat for you.
Huh?
My family and friends are coming today. I'd be embarrassed if they thought you were my family. So, don't come to the ceremony.
What? You might dress up, but you know, with a background like yours, expectations are low.
She was laughing on the other end of the phone.
I'm the star of the day. You understand that, right? Does my brother know about this? Of course. He can't say no to me.
Understood. But I'd like to talk after the ceremony.
I'll consider it. Give me the gift later, okay?
She hung up after having her say. My husband was looking puzzled at me, standing in stunned silence. Misty said, it would be embarrassing if I came to the wedding, so don't come. Tears started flowing as I spoke, unable to hold back.
Are you serious?
But it's my brother's wedding. And he agreed to it. As my husband comforted me by gently rubbing my back, he exhaled as if he had made up his mind.
Let's investigate the facts and talk to David properly. David is not the kind of person who would tell you not to come to the wedding.
My husband seemed quite angry.
We also need to clarify that. It would be better for David as well. I understand. Thank you.
1 week after the wedding, my SAL came alone to the restaurant I had called her to.
Huh?
She seemed surprised not just to see me there. And it's understandable. It wasn't just my husband and me. My parents, my brother, and even her own parents were all there.
Why? I didn't hear anything. Is there something going on today?
Yes. You told me to hand over the gift, right?
Really, it was a joke. Did you need to go to this extent?
I have something to discuss before I hand it over. It seemed suspicious to her that no one else was speaking. Her gaze was frantically shifting around the room. Miss D, you worked for Sunrise Systems before your marriage, didn't you?
And so what? Why did you quit? It's obvious, isn't it? I was getting married and having a baby. I thought my husband had accepted that, so why bring it up now? Accepted? I didn't say anything about her quitting, but to suddenly quit just because she's pregnant, without discussing it first.
My brother sighed in exasperation.
But that's old news, right?
At that point, my husband chimed in. Actually, Sunrise Systems, where she worked, is a client of my company. They're almost like a subsidiary, so we get quite a bit of inside information.
What?
Seemingly at a loss for words, my SAL fell silent as my husband spoke. I thought she looked familiar. She had an affair with a married supervisor at her workplace, felt uncomfortable, and quit, right?
That's...
Weren't your parents aware of that as well? As he looked at my silent in-laws, they let out a deep sigh. We apologize.
She cried and said she was forced into the relationship by her boss. We believed her. We're really sorry.
We thought it was all in the past. With heads bowed deeply, my SAL's parents apologized.
What the hell? I was forced by my boss. That's what I said. It's all in the past now.
Past? At the sound of my brother's voice, low as a rumble of thunder, my SAL trembled. He sighed heavily and laid several photos out in front of everyone.
How are you going to explain these?
The photos showed my SAL and a middle-aged man arm in arm, entering a hotel together.
I was shocked to hear from my sister and her husband after the wedding that your affair with your old boss is still ongoing.
Within only a week, my brother had gathered a lot of evidence. Right after the wedding, we consulted with my brother about my SAL, passing on all the information we had. We told him that we had been uninvited from the wedding, that she had been nasty to us long before that, and that she had quit her job due to an affair. My brother had been told by my SAL that I wasn't at the wedding because I had severe morning sickness. My brother apologized for everything she did, even though he had done nothing wrong. When I asked him what he was going to do, he said he would look into it himself. And a week later, when my brother told me he was ready, I called my SAL. My brother had called our parents and her parents here himself.
This.
Everyone knows. That's why we called her here. As my SAL tried to snatch away the photos in panic, she froze in despair upon hearing those words.
You've also been bullying my sister. Why?
With a sullen look on her face, my SAL muttered.
It's just, despite being so much less attractive than me, she looked so happy. Her family is so close-knit, too. She should be satisfied with that, but she even got pregnant, while I'm the one who should be the center of attention. So that's why you didn't invite her to the wedding? Of course. It's my wedding. It's strange to have someone else being congratulated.
Everyone was at a loss for words at the sight of my SAL, who nonchalantly justified her actions.
Let's divorce. No. Do you think you have the right to say no? But I have a baby. How are you going to take responsibility?
She stood up, placed her hands on her stomach, and shouted.
If it's my child, of course I'll continue to pay child support even after the divorce. If it's really my child.
After that, my brother and his wife divorced. She put up quite a fuss, but given her actions leading to the divorce, it was clear she was at a disadvantage. No court proceedings were necessary. When she was told she'd be legally accountable for a reasonable sum of money if they went to court, she conceded for a smaller amount. After the child was born, a DNA test showed that my brother wasn't the father. Figures. My brother said, looking a bit pained. Because the child was born within 300 days of the divorce, by law, the child was considered to be David's, my brother. It's a bit of a hassle that parentage can't be denied without going through civil litigation, but with the DNA test results in hand, there's no need to worry. The ex-wife continued her relationship with her former boss unabashedly and was thoroughly chastised when the boss's wife found out. Apparently, this was the second time the wife found out. The first was when she quit her job, and now again when she decided to divorce. The first time, their parents had intervened, but after this incident, it seems she's been abandoned even by them. For some reason, the ex-wife has been contacting my brother for help, he mentioned in a tired voice. Nearly a year after that incident, the phone rang.
Hello? What do you think you're doing?
The ex-wife's shrill voice echoed in my ears. My husband looked at me in surprise as our child lay sleeping in the crib. The ex-assailant seemed out of sorts, frantic.
It's your fault for never picking up, no matter how many times I've called. You've made me miserable, so I'm going to make you miserable too, she screamed over and over. Your current situation is your own making. Shut up! I won't be satisfied until you've gone through the same. If you keep playing dead, I'll burn down this entire apartment.
I paled at the ex-wife's threats. My husband, who had been listening beside me, immediately reported it to the police. Then, the ex-wife was arrested. The police arrived in time to prevent arson, but since she couldn't get into our house, she had damaged our door and windows, seemingly caught in the act of vandalism. After that, fearing the ex-wife's stalking behavior, we decided to go ahead with our long-planned home build and moved there. We no longer live in the apartment the ex-wife knew about. That, at least, was a relief. We got busy with things like child-rearing, but we're leading a lively and enjoyable life. My brother comes to visit and plays with our child. Apparently, my brother has someone he likes recently, and occasionally he consults with my husband and me, blushing a bit.
Let us meet her before you decide to get married this time, okay?
I joked, to which my brother responded with a wry smile, saying, I'm counting on it.